Talking Buckeyes football here at the Voice of College Football here each and every week. Sometimes we trick you. That's why it's important to subscribe. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live, typically on Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. But these boys have gone camping, will go camping again on Wednesday, and therefore here we are on a Tuesday. So again, it's important to keep track of the schedule by keeping that notifications bell on. Right next to me, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Weekly, Buckeye Huddle, I'll get that straight, the Big Me podcast, and College Football Playbook, as well as That's the Venture with Tony Gerdeman right here on YouTube. Tony right below there, Buckeye Huddle, and of course, Buckeye Weekly is his podcast. Steve Hellwagon, merely 247 Sports Bucknuts, as he has been a long time staple there, of course. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing great.
All right. Appreciate you all being here. Jalen McClain, Steve, is in the fold from New Jersey as a top 10 to 15 safety in the country.
Yeah, Ohio State, obviously the safety position is integral part of the defense with three of them on the field in this new scheme for Jim Knowles, and Perry Eliano is doing his best to fill up that meeting room with safety prospects, and landed one, Jalen McClain from Orange, New Jersey, ranked number 243 overall in the country. And he had kind of narrowed his choices down to Ohio State, USC, Notre Dame, and Oregon. He had an official visit, I think, this past weekend, 6 foot, 190 pounds. And the Buckeyes, as we said, really going after some safeties there. They've got Reggie Powers, I think, from Centerville, Ohio, is also in their sights. They're going to have one apparently in for a visit this weekend from Georgia, KJ Bolden, one of the top prospects in the country overall. And they just had one on campus at the camp. I'm just double checking his name, Zaquan Patterson, national top 100 player from Chaminade Madonna Prep in Hollywood, Florida. I am not sure, Tony, you were at the camp yesterday. Was he working out at the camp, or was he just on a visit?
Just on a visit, checking things out.
Okay. But that's most of what we know about McClain. Obviously, guy that had some great offers, Seton Hall Prep there in New Jersey, one of the top players in New Jersey this year. And certainly, again, as we say, they're trying to build up the depth at the safety position.
Kevin, anything on Jalen McClain?
Yeah, sorry, I was kind of going through and looking some of the other safeties on their board. McClain, 6 foot 185, as Steve had mentioned. Jersey football certainly produces some talent, and Ohio State really likes this guy. There's a little bit of a debate where he ranks. Some services have him as a 3, some have him as a 4. His overall composite is as a 4-star. So there's a lot to like there. I mean, I'm not ready to kind of put him into one of the positions and say this is who he is. He's an adjuster. He's whatever. But I like his film from what I've seen, and I think that it's an important get as Ohio State starts to work on its safety board. Steve had mentioned some names, KJ Bolden obviously being like the big one. Georgia's really done a lot in its recruitment of Bolden. I know there would be a lot of disappointed Ohio State fans if Bolden gets away, if you can even use that terminology, as a kid out of Georgia, who could potentially go to Georgia. I certainly like, Ohio State's pursuit of Zaquan Patterson. Might be hard to get him out of South Florida, but remember, Chaminade Madonna is the same school that produced Jeremiah Smith, and JoJo Trader's there as well. Reggie Powers, the kid out of Centerville, he's trending toward Michigan State at this point. It looked like it was really close between he and Ohio State at one point, but things have seemed to kind of go awry there a little bit. And then one other name to keep an eye on is a current Georgia commit, Peyton Woodyard, who's supposed to visit Ohio State as well. If Ohio State is able to get him out for the official, USC has also secured an official already, and that's already gone down with Woodyard. that would be a huge flip. But a lot of talent out there on Ohio State's safety board in terms of targets. It'll be interesting to see which ones kind of come to be.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see which ones Georgia doesn't sign, because right now they've got 3 of the top 6 committed, and that's not including KJ Bolden, who could end up there. So you would hope that Ohio State would get one of those guys, be it Bolden or Woodyard. But in terms of Jalen McClain, I'm with Kevin. Like, I don't know where he's going to play yet, because he's played every position in the secondary in high school and plays them all pretty well. So, he has experience playing corner. He has experience playing deep safety. You see him quite a bit at nickel. When you've got that kind of skill set, you put him out there and you figure out where you need him and where he ends up being best. So I think he could show up anywhere. And 3-star, 4-star, they accepted his commitment in June. So that tells you exactly what you need to know in terms of how much they like him, especially when they're still competing for so many other top safeties nationally, that they went ahead and said, yeah, we'll take this guy.
Yeah, I think there's still some question about Garrett Stover as well, whether he's going to be a safety or a linebacker, athlete prospect out of Big Walnut here in Central Ohio, and just the 3rd defensive commitment out of 14 commitments. So they have a lot of work to do in building a class on the defensive side of the football. And I think that's endemic of Jim Knowles only being his 2nd year at Ohio State, as well as Tim Walton and Perry Eliano. I think that, now is the time when they're going to start to ramp up a little bit in terms of putting some bodies on that defensive side of the football, and not only just putting bodies there, but they need difference makers as well if the Ohio State defense is going to continue its trend of upward mobility.
But I will say this: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Just the targets that Ohio State is going after are kids that are not ready to commit yet. So everybody can sit there and say, oh, the ship is broken, Ohio State can't recruit defensive guys. And I'm like, that's not the case. They have guys that are making July, August, September decisions, December decisions. I mean, Ohio State could have a class of 25 defensive players if it wanted to. It wouldn't be the one that y'all would want, but it could go out there and get it. But it just so happens that when you're going after an Edric Houston, when you're going after a KJ Bolden, when you're going after a lot of these guys, and these guys aren't ready to commit, is that on you? Is it? I mean, it's not a case of where, you can knock your visit out of the park. You can sit there and have all of the best of the best, but if the kid ain't ready, the kid ain't ready. So, I understand the hand wringing, and I understand all the concern, but it's just a case of where it is, that some of these offensive guys were ready to commit when they were. And if you're a wide receiver, you want to get your spot at Ohio State while you can. The way that this offensive line class is, it's primarily from the state of Ohio. So you're going to get those guys in there. You would think that maybe a Bryce West or maybe an Aaron Scott would already be on board being in-state guys. That could be coming here pretty soon. Where does a Terion Nichols stand? I mean, I think that that's somebody, if he was greenlit, that could happen pretty quickly. But, there's a natural ebb and flow here, and we're just dealing with the ebb and flow. And that, right now, it just seems that defensive recruiting is a little bit of a riptide, but it's going to happen. I can assure you. I'm
tired of Ohio State lagging behind when you've got programs like Alabama out there with 4 defensive commitments at this point. What's the problem here with Ohio State?
Yes, Alabama obviously has lost its fastball, and they are not in any way going to be a factor in any of the top of the line recruiting rankings at the end of this deal. We've not seen this before. When we look at Amazon, folks, when you shop Amazon, look at the ticker below. Please use the link that we provide in the description of the videos. It helps us build the channel. Doesn't cost you a penny. Same shopping experience. You guys ultimately produce the show. We get to your comments and questions. The super chat helps. Certainly, we have not obligated ourselves in any way, folks, to answer all of your comments and questions. But if you leave the super chat, we certainly will, and we will answer other comments and questions. Anything from Tuesday camp that stood out to any of you?
I think for me, the fact that Marlon Graham was there, 5-star wide receiver commit, kind of, I think, a bit of a surprise that he showed up, not, because he doesn't need to, he's committed, but he said he wanted to get some work in with Brian Hartline. So he took advantage of the opportunity and continues to look really, really good. The other guy that I'll talk about would be Jordan Davison, the 2025 5-star running back, ranked the number 1 running back in the nation by some service. But he looked good as well. And he's a compact guy, over 200 pounds, just a strong lower body, but showed some quickness as well. There's also, and I didn't get his name, a running back from Sweden that came with the PPI group from overseas, and he was probably the second best running back, maybe the first best running back that I saw, but he's a 2024 kid. And so, there's no room for him in most places at this point, but he looked like he's going to make somebody happy.
Yeah, I was at the camp as well. Would agree with a lot of what Tony said. I think I need to find my notes. Doggone it, not prepared as usual.
Neither was I, Steve.
Let's see. They had a couple offensive linemen. Carter Lowe was there, a 2025 prospect, ranked number 143 in the country. I think Toledo Whitmer. Does that sound right, Tony? Is that where he's from? And then an offensive lineman, Micah Smith. He goes by the nickname of Champ from Vero Beach, Florida. Kevin, did you cover him on the swing down south, or?
No, we drove through Vero, but we did not go and cover him.
Apparently, he received an offer. There was also an offensive lineman from 2026, Merrill. I didn't write down his first name. He got an offer as well. So they were very active yesterday. In terms of that, just some other notable guys. Defensive lineman Eric Mensa was there. Jarvon Hammonds from Huber Heights, Wayne, a 2024 kid. Linebacker Tarvos Alford, ranked number 104 in the country for 2025 from Florida. He was there. So, those were some of the notables that I saw and that I jotted down. But, again, with probably 400 to 500 kids there, it's kind of hard. You're looking for needles in the haystack. And then there were guys who were supposed to be there, who you think are there, but they're not there. And, the usual dance, is that so-and-so? That's not so-and-so. That's so-and-so. So, nobody wears a name tag or anything like that. So they used to wear a number like a marathon runner would wear, on their front to identify them, but they don't even bother with those tags anymore. Figured, they know who the players are. But, so for us on the outside, it makes it a little bit problematic trying to put a name in a high school and a class with a particular player. But really, 2 more days of it this week, Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be out there. And, should be, again, I would agree with what Tony said. It was fun to watch Marlon Graham go to work. They put all the top defensive backs who were there up against him, and he made his share of plays. It was kind of a blustery, crappy day like it is today here in Ohio. So the quarterbacks were having a little bit of difficulty, making the pinpoint accurate passes. And I don't know that the quality of the quarterbacks at yesterday's camp were anything to write home about either. So, that kind of, in a nutshell, may have sealed up what I know and what I saw for the most part.
Let me jump in. The running back from Sweden, Oliver Lundberg Coleman, ranked the number 118 running back in the 24/7 rankings, the number 2,128 player overall in the composite, but the number 1 player in Sweden. He committed to Western Kentucky last July, and he blew everybody away there. And you see, because there are coaches from the MAC there as well, so they're watching, and afterwards they're all talking to him. And I think it was a coach from Kent State or Akron was like, "How do you say ball security in Swedish?" And so, he learned how to say ball security in Swedish. The coach did, and tells another coach, "Remember that." But I think that guy, he impressed a bunch of people yesterday. Also, 2 Buckeye legacies there. Jackson Wiley, 2025 receiver from Olentangy, the son of Michael Wiley, so that the people watching can feel old. Also, 2027 quarterback Emmett Queen, the son of former Buckeye defensive lineman Heath Queen, was there as well. So enjoy your gray hair.
For the kid from Sweden, that him playing in the Stockholm Scandinavian, intercoastal league there, the quality of competition sometimes in that league is not, what you'd think of some of the other leagues in Sweden. So that may be why his ranking's a little down a little bit.
Well, and that's the thing with these PPI kids. I mean, it's not like the networks are sending guys over there. And even if you did, how do you really judge them? A lot of these European players, when they decide that American football is their future, I'm going to use Hero Canoe as an example, moved to the States. And, he played at Rancho Santa Margarita Christian or something like that, some school that I really did. I'm from California, and I didn't really know much about the school. You have a lot of them that end up in the state of Florida as well. And at that point, you get an opportunity to maybe see them going against guys that grew up playing American football. But I never really get too hung up on the rankings of these Euro players, because even if you have them nailed at that moment you're doing the evaluation, you nail it exactly. They're drinking from a fire hose. They're learning about the game. They're learning how all of it works. And I mean, their growth is exponential in terms of where they are. They're having to do a lot of the things that a lot of these other players are learning between 7th and 8th grade, 8th and 9th grade, 9th and 10th grade. They're having to learn very much later in the process. So, it's always good to see the Euro tour out there. I mean, Brandon Collier, who runs this PPI event, does a great job with it. I want to go back and answer a question and mix it up with my friend Justin Courtney. I think it was Big Sim who was asking, does Ohio State have an opportunity of landing Brandon Baker? The answer is absolutely. Ohio State absolutely has a chance of landing Brandon Baker. Now, does that mean that Ohio State is suddenly going to forego his visit to Oregon and anything else? No, it doesn't mean that at all. And Ohio State, certainly riding the high post-visit and everything else. But to say that Ohio State doesn't have a legitimate shot at him coming right off of the heels of his official visit is just dishonest. I mean, Ohio State absolutely has a shot there. If you ask me right now to take Ohio State or the field, I'm probably taking the field. But I mean, it's not by much. I think Ohio State did a lot of good work there.
Big Sim is also asking whether the Buckeyes have a shot at Kobe Black.
I'll jump in there too. Kobe Black is somebody that, he is a 5-star corner, but at what point, how many corners does Ohio State take? Does Ohio State get Bryce West? Does Ohio State get Aaron Scott? Does Ohio State get to Ryan Nichols? At some point, there's just a, diminishing return on numbers. And truthfully speaking, if you sit there and you get a class of West, Scott, and Nichols, and they're all in-state guys, and you're probably not going to have to recruit your rear end off until signing day, until you sign them to hold on to them. I know Michigan's going to be trying to kick the tires on at least one or two of them, but it's a lot easier to secure a guy who is just, up 71 or out on 70 to keep that guy versus a guy in Kobe Black who is in California, if I recall correctly. So, in Waco, Texas. Get my guys confused there. But, I mean, you never know. Ohio State sometimes is able to pull off that shocker, but haven't really seen that as of late under this current administration when it comes to defensive players. So I need to see one of those December surprises before I totally buy into one.
They're also the leaders for Miles Lockhart out of Arizona. So, I think they're going to take a bunch of defensive backs, but, if you're waiting for Kobe Black, I'm not saying they'll be too full. They would probably still take him, but they're not going to wait for him in lieu of others, I don't think.
No, you don't. You can't hold a spot there and lose somebody in state and then have to face them 3 or 4 times just because you were out there hunting for big game and you end up getting burned.
Playing off something that Steve mentioned, it being a cold, blustery day for June standards. I've always been a slight geography type nerd. And so I don't have to have ever been to Oregon to know what the weather's like in Oregon. I pretty much have a good feel for what the weather's like in every part of the country and always have. But I'm sometimes amazed when I run across certain people who have no idea what the weather's like in certain parts of the country. Had a next door neighbor from California who showed up in May in Connecticut and thought, this is the most amazing place in the world. We want to live here. So they moved to Connecticut with no idea, like a 60-year-old woman, what it's going to be like in the middle of January in Connecticut, thinking this is what it's like the entire time. And I'm just mystified as to people not understanding what the temperature elements are across the country to a certain extent. So now we're talking about 17, 18-year-old kids coming up from Georgia and Florida and maybe not realizing that 3 days ago it was 85, but now it's 62 and it's a bit blustery. Is Ohio like this all the time? And does that work to Ohio State's advantage or, of course, disadvantage?
But recruiting against the weather is always just such an interesting thing for me, because if you sit there and you listen to fans of Southern schools, they make it sound like 6 months of the year that this is Ice Station Zebra out here.
Yes.
It's that playing anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon line, whether it be Columbus or Bloomington or Ann Arbor or wherever. I mean, I'm going to leave Minneapolis off of there because it is Ice Station Zebra there, but that it's 20 below and snow drifts of 3 feet, and oh, you want to play your games in the snow? I mean, how many games? We've all covered this team pretty much over the same range of time. Steve has a little bit of longevity on us in terms of when his career started, but how many games have we covered where there has been noticeable snow? And I mean, that's not like, a little bit of dusting or whatever, but that there's been, that they've had to scrape the field or anything. I can't really remember many games like that.
Yeah, it's very rare. Very rare. That Michigan game 2 years ago, but even then the ground was so warm that it wasn't sticking entirely until later in the game. So yeah, it was a nuisance, but I don't think that's the exception rather than the rule.
The story I keep telling is the last 3 times we've been out to LA or Arizona for a bowl game or a playoff game, it's been warmer in Columbus, at least a couple of those days, than it was out in Arizona or LA in January or just late December. So yeah, February kind of sucks, but the rest of the time it could be like this in January. It could be like this in February. It's not normally like this in June, but clearly it can be. I do think there are recruits from the South who are like, I am not going to the North because I'm just not. And yes, of course I'm going to play in the NFL. I'll deal with it then, but I'm not going to do it now. And then there are others who are like, I'm going to have to play in this weather in the NFL, so it doesn't matter. But I think it does absolutely matter to some. And I wonder what percentage of those players end up being successful at the next level when they've already decided, I don't want to play out in the cold, or even I don't want to play out in the cool, right? Because there are only a few cold games. And there were a few years back at Michigan State where they're taking the tarp off the field and it's like covered in ice and things like that. But yeah, like you guys have said, there's dustings of snow and that's about it.
Yeah,
we say that,
and now we're doomed. You've doomed us all. But yeah, I don't really remember many. I mean, I certainly remember when I was an undergrad. I think it was Penn State's first trip out to Columbus or whatever. That it snowed substantially that game in mid '90s. But
93.
I certainly remember, and I put Minneapolis kind of off on its own. I mean, I remember the JT Barrett 86-yard touchdown run, and I think it was like 14 degrees, maybe 14 below. I don't know. It was stupid cold at that game, but you know what you're getting into with Minneapolis, which is basically Canada Junior.
Yeah, with all this conference realignment talk and actual conference realignment, that probably has been discussed way too much by all of us. But yeah, if you do the math on the number of games, home and road, and the whole deal, it's just very unlikely. Just turn on Big Ten games throughout November. It takes until about the second to last week of the season typically to they're at Camp Randall. There's finally some weather, but up until then, no. A lot
You get
of
more
50,
weather in
55-degree days.
You get more weather in the Pac-12. With Colorado and Utah that you've got to deal with than you do in the Big Ten.
Wazoo. I mean, I've certainly
Yeah.
seen games out there in Pullman on TV that have looked pretty miserable.
Absolutely. We talk Buckeyes here each and every week with all of you, typically on a Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. These guys are going camping tomorrow. So here we are on a Tuesday. Appreciate everybody rescheduling, whether that's Steve, Kevin, and Tony, and all of you as well. Please check out the rest of the show that you missed. Most of you filing in a little bit late, so you can always watch it a little bit later. Catch Kevin, Big Me Podcast, Buckeye Huddle, and the College Football Playbook. That's a new venture that Tony, and others have going on here on YouTube, College Football Playbook. We will post the link in the chat. Check out Tony and his podcast, Buckeye Weekly, in addition to his work at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And of course, Steve's at 247 Sports, Bucknuts, and we appreciate Steve posting these videos each week. That's a great help to us on Bucknuts. Latching on to another thing that Steve said in regards to trying to figure out who's here and who's not here and who was supposed to be here. Well, based, I guess, on who's supposed to be showing up on Wednesday, Tony, who would be anticipated in regards to your biggest interests on Wednesday?
Let me grab the list here.
Or anybody else who wants to chime in.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a list in front of me. We don't necessarily have the camp on the 14th fully listed out. We're certainly not provided names by Ohio State. This is things we have to get on our own. Garrett Stover, the commit out of Big Walnut, will be there. Ohio State legacy Trey McNutt, a 2025 athlete, should be there. And then you got a couple of other 25 guys with defensive linemen, Zahir Mathis, and 25 wide receiver out of Cocoa, Florida, Javon Boggs. Now, Ohio State obviously has gone into Cocoa. That's where Cedric Hawkins is out of. Ohio State also had a defensive player whose name is escaping me. I'm trying to get it right now.
Jamel Dean.
Well, no, I was going to say a guy who, that's and what's his face with the mustache? Oh, it was Jamel Dean.
Bruce Judson.
But no, there was a player who plays at Cocoa who just decided on a whim to come out to camp at Ohio State, and I'll have his name in front of me here in a second. Javion Hilson, who was a very impressive player, who just decided, I'm going to talk to Ced, and I'm going to go visit Ohio State. Jumped in the car and ended up in Columbus, and was pretty unstoppable there. But we'll get to camp and we'll see some names or whatever. And when you have 5 one-day camps, there is the potential that one of them could be up against other camps and just not work into travel plans, and it's not your strongest camp. I'm not saying that's going to be the case here on the 14th, but at this point, don't have a very fully formed list.
I will say, go ahead,
I think
Steve.
Michigan's having a camp on Wednesday as well, I believe.
Marquise Davis, running back from 2025, Cleveland Heights, who has an Ohio State offer, is scheduled. We've heard that he will be at Ohio State on Wednesday. He's got other offers, Illinois, Boston College, but I got at Ohio State certainly serious about Michigan offered him a couple of weeks ago, so maybe that becomes another Ohio State Michigan running back battle. And whether that's good news or not for the Buckeyes, based on the Jordan Marshall recent commit.
You look at him, and then you look at Dorian Brew. I mean, what does what side of the ball do you want to put Brew on? I mean, where does he fit in? And then with Jordan Davison, something's got to give. So it'll be interesting to see how that one works.
And Bo Jackson isn't.
That's what I meant. I meant to say Bo Jackson.
And Bo Jackson's a 2025 guy. I mean, he's the nicest looking prospect you'll see at running back. straight out of Central Casting. So,
and I know
Yeah.
Ohio State absolutely loves Bo Jackson. I mean, I know Ohio State really likes Marquise Davis too. And but if you have Jordan Davison saying, "Yeah, I'm in. I want to," I mean, you end up with a situation once again of you can't take them all, and that's a good problem to have. But it can be bad when that guy comes back and plays against you and has that extra chip on his shoulder. And the scene from Major League where Charlie Sheen ends up getting the ticket in his locker, and he goes into the coach's office and talks about where he's going to put that baseball whenever he faces them. That you don't want to have that.
I thought you were going to say the scene from the Outback Bowl where Ryan Brewer ran all over the Buckeyes because he didn't have an offer.
I put that in mind.
You're right. Jordan Davison, Bo Jackson, those two guys. This isn't 1990 anymore, so you can't take 3 running backs every year, and they're trying to take 3 in 2024. So I don't think there'd be room in 2025. But yeah, that's going to be a pretty big running back haul two years in a row if things shake out the way they're looking.
1990 was I don't know if you did that intentionally, Tony, but that was a great year to hit for running backs in regards to how deep were they in terms of at least guys making NFL camps. What, Robert Smith, Butler Binote, Scotty Graham, Carlos Snow, Raymond Harris,
Jeff
Cothran.
Yeah.
There were
right?
A bunch of guys there in that 89 to 92 range that you could bring in guys like Travis McGuire, the top echelon recruits, and they don't all pan out. But you could back then, you just bring in 4 running backs a year because
our guy Yakov, we appreciate Yakov, is taking a cue to get us started on our scheduling segment and portion of the show. He's going the out-of-conference route. So, of course, we've got a 12-team playoff starting in 2024, and we know about various teams' status and whether they really need out-of-conference games. So the incentive of scheduling difficult non-conference games. I kind of questioned it myself.
Very little.
Yep.
There's very little incentive once you get to 12. I mean, the thing to sit there and say is we know that there's not going to be 12 undefeated teams at the end of the year, or even 6 to fill in, quote unquote, the wild cards. So in a lot of ways, I think the incentive is to play another team, a team that you don't have scouted on a yearly basis because they're a conference foe, to see how you stack up against them. And, if you win it, I mean, that's certainly a feather in your cap. That's certainly something that a selection committee would notice, especially if you stub your toe and you don't win your conference. I mean, there's some bounce from that. But, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, well, make as few waves as you can along the way, play 8 conference games and play 4 patsies and just get there unharmed. Well, the number of undefeated teams that we see at the end of the year shows that even that doesn't necessarily work. You're going to stub your toe somewhere more than likely. 11-1 is much more likely than 12-0 for so many teams out there. But no, there isn't a ton of that other than just maybe, bragging rights. Well, at least we don't duck everybody. We have this series every 2 years. We know that we're going to have this series or that series, and Ohio State can't even really fly that banner in 24 after it changed its schedule and dropped the Washington series. But Ohio State is certainly a much more aggressive scheduling team than some others out there. But I don't see a ton of incentive in terms of if your goal is to sit there and say we want to get through this season unscathed. I mean, losable games can be lost.
Yeah, and I think going forward with the 12-team playoff, you can afford that loss if it happens in September and still make the playoff if you do really well in your league. I think 10-2 may get you in some years if you've played a decent enough schedule. They're going to weigh that out and say, yeah, they were 10-2, but they lost to the number 4 team and they lost to the number 9 team. this is still a quality team. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is creation of an event and a schedule that people will want to come and watch your team play. I think, next year's season ticket sales will be a little bit soft because there are no marquee games other than Michigan. Whereas, last year when you had Notre Dame on there and Michigan, they were able to sell suites and seats and parking spots at a premium price and up the contribution that you needed just to have the right to buy stuff, all those things. So I think it's just kind of an all enveloping thing at Ohio State that you create the buzz surrounding a Texas series. I mean, when Alabama rolls around here in a few years, they're going to up all that stuff I just talked about, add another 10% for whatever it is on an annual basis that you pay for seats, parking, and the contribution just to buy seats. Add whatever it was, X plus 10% that year. So it's kind of a windfall for the athletic department to have those marquee events on the schedule every now and then, I think. So I think that's part of their thinking. I guess I just don't subscribe to the idea of, well, we've got a football team, let's not test them. I don't know. I've in my entire time at Ohio State, back to when I was a student, they've always played, on average, one really good non-conference game every year, and sometimes more than that. And obviously a few years like next year, just the way the schedule broke, they're going to play 3 group of 5 teams as opposed to any Power 5 teams. But, typically it's been the tradition at Ohio State that you play at least one decently high caliber team. I remember Washington with Tyrone Willingham was kind of at rock bottom, but it just happened to be when that game was scheduled and Ohio State went out there and won that game pretty handily. So just as an example, but yeah, I would prefer it if I was a fan that my team would play a big name non-conference opponent, just because, they play so many crappy teams throughout the course of the year. I mean, this year really boils down to a 4-game season, and with Notre Dame, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Michigan, I don't think anybody else, is really on this schedule. Going to test them that heavily. Maybe Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Penn State, and Michigan. I mean, is there anybody else on this schedule that's really going to, put a fear in you? And then ultimately it comes down, as I've said this before, to how they play in the second half of the Michigan game. Do they stop the run in that one half of football? That'll determine 12-0 or 11-1, probably, I think, for Ohio State this year. But I'm good with it. I like them having one good game a year.
Yeah, until about 30 years ago, all of the non-conference games were against what we would consider Power 5 opponents. They were other big conference opponents. And then, like 30 years ago, you start throwing in Bowling Green, and they finally decided, okay, let's start playing some Ohio schools again. And then from there, you just, now let's play Rice, and now let's play, somebody else that's an easy win. And, Fresno State they did, and just examples like that. But before that, it was all Power 5 legitimate teams. I mean, you look at like 1987, it was West Virginia, Oregon, and LSU. The year before that, it was Alabama, Washington, and Colorado. Like that was the normal non-conference schedule. And then what you get next year is, it's an insult to the Ohio State fans. It's an insult to college football fans. And Michigan is dealing with it these next 2 years. And I think if you're seeing a decline in attendance, Ohio State doesn't sell games out anymore. Gene Smith isn't trying to sell games out anymore. They're just trying to make as much money as they can while getting a win, and knowing that you're going to lose some people to the television audience. You're just going to stay home. But you know what? If you have better games, then they might actually come to the games and spend time in town. And the idea that you shouldn't be playing more big games and out of conference, I think the incentive, as Steve said, there's the challenging yourself. I mean, it's like Tom Izzo's non-conference schedule. He does that so that they will be ready for the tournament. Michigan, their non-conference schedule has not prepared them for the playoffs, and we've seen that 2 years in a row now. And Ohio State's schedule is not going to prepare them for the playoffs. Their practice is going to have to prepare them for the playoffs, the non-conference rather. They'll get plenty of work from the conference foes next year, but I think you can afford losses. There were 4 teams last year that had 1 loss or less when the final rankings were set, when the playoffs would have been set. So you've got 8 teams with at least 2 losses that are going to make the playoffs last year. The year before, there were 5 teams with 0 or 1 losses. So you'd have 7 teams with multiple losses in the playoffs. There's going to be a year where you've got a team with 3 losses in the playoffs. Like, you can't afford to lose. You can't afford to give your fans entertaining games. You can afford to give your television partners who control your lives now games worth watching. And I think I'm interested to see if the TV people get more involved in scheduling this stuff, because NBC right now is looking at their schedule and they're like, why are we airing Maryland and Towson, stuff like that? And it's like, why couldn't we be airing, Maryland and West Virginia, or, just games like that, as opposed to the games we're getting?
Yeah, I just think at some point a committee, a governing body has to get involved. That's what I love about what the Big Ten did with the conference schedule. Is it's almost an NFL format where there is a regimented set of guidelines that is a formula, but then there's also a nuance that is based on, what was the term used, the changing of the competitive balance or the competitive trends as we go from 2 year to 2 year to 2 years. So we'll move along, Tony, and stay with you in regards to how did that scheduling formula hit you?
I'll have to go back. I've been at camp a while and I'm very, very brain tired, but no, I like it. I don't mind losing Penn State. You're still everybody's going to see everybody twice over a 4-year period. So that is fine by me. That's plenty of Penn State. And then, you don't play Penn State 1 year. So now you get to play Minnesota. Now you get to play Nebraska. Now you get to play UCLA or USC instead. So I think you give that up. I was surprised that there's only like 11 protected rivalry games in the entirety of the Big Ten. I figured there would be more. And I did not. I just learned that Illinois and Purdue was a rivalry, like just last week. I did not know that.
That's the one that stood out to me out of the 11. It was like, okay, they all make sense. Illinois and Purdue.
There's got to be a road from West Lafayette to Champaign that we don't know about, like a 2-lane road, and that is the I don't know if it wouldn't be US 30, but whatever it is, state route 155 rivalry, between and then it's got to be a different state route number when it crosses over into Illinois. So yeah, there's got to be a 2-lane road that connects those 2 great outposts, no doubt.
I think they play for the Turd in the Punch Bowl trophy.
Yeah, they're not far apart. They're, by the crow flies, maybe 70 miles, 90 miles apart. But at any rate, Penn State, I wonder if Penn State just told Ohio State in the Big Ten, you know what? This has been wonderful. We've played every year since 1993. And we've had so many great memories and so many great games overall in that stretch that, this rivalry really has been awesome. But we'd also like the chance to play Northwestern and, Rutgers and Maryland. And, of course, those teams are in the division. Some of those crud teams from the West Division, I guess, on a little bit more regular basis. And, the facts speak for themselves. Ohio State's won 11 of the last 12 or 10 of the last 11 and the last 6 in a row. And I just think there's some Ohio State fatigue on the Penn State side that they're not going to miss not having to play Ohio State, every year. They can still play them twice in a 4-year period or whatever. And it'll still be a big deal when they play, but I don't think they objected too much to the idea that the Ohio State series was going by the wayside. And I wonder from the Ohio State standpoint if they thought, well, we've got Michigan, as our number one rivalry. Do we really need to mandate a second rivalry game that, Penn State most years is going to be a top 15 team anyway? So why do we need to mandate ourselves to that? I don't know. I don't know. I see all sides of it, but I just think Penn State was okay with this. I think they're more than okay with this.
Well, we got to have it one way or the other. I mean, are we sitting there trying to find the path to get Ohio State to its best record? And, why are you playing these out of conference games? Well, why would you sit there and want to have Penn State as a second protected rival along with Michigan? I mean, you sit there and you look under, historically, I mean, Michigan certainly had some bad years in there. Penn State had some bad years after, its troubles and everything else. But why would you want to sit there and have yourself signed up yearly to play two of the top 3, 2 of the top 4 teams year in and year out in the Big Ten? So I think in some ways there's an essence of just looking at the path that you're going to go through. I mean, if the Big Ten would have sat there and said, no, we're going to make sure everybody has 3 rivals, and Ohio State had Michigan, Penn State, and let's just say they made up the rivalry because of obviously all the old Rose Bowls of USC, people would have lost their mind. Oh my God, you got to play these 3 teams every single year, and the expectation to potentially have, a marquee out of conference game. It ends up becoming a lot. Now, on the flip side, you want to sell tickets and put butts in seats and everything else, and having those types of games certainly gets you there. But I'm fine with not having Penn State as a yearly rival. There's not really any long-term history there whatsoever. I mean, there's not Steve's as the crow flies between Champaign and West Lafayette or anything like that. This was a new creation, and that's fine. I'm looking forward to plenty of other things that could become rivalries. But if we're going to sit there and look at some of these things, why wasn't Ohio State, Illinois, and Illinois put in as something?
First, Kevin, I will correct you about the longevity of this rivalry between Ohio State and Penn State, because it is Ohio State's longest running uninterrupted rivalry going on right now. That's 30 plus years that they've played without anybody
COVID bullshit cancellation
or just saying, I don't want to play. Like, they have been playing continuously. Interestingly, and I just remembered that I wrote about this. Thanks for asking, Mark. Like a few days back, about the what I'm calling the Big Four of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and USC of the new Big Ten. Those 4 teams only play each year 2 of the other 4, basically 2 of the other 3. They never play 3 of those guys in one year. Michigan State has to play 3 of them in both years. They are the only Big Ten school that has to play 3 of those Big Four each year. I think there are 3 teams that outside of those 4 Big Four that won't play 3 in one year. Everybody else will play 3 at least in one year. And to me, that tells me that the Big Ten is trying to set those teams up. They're Big Four right now. These are the teams that we are projecting to go to the playoffs. So let's give them an easier road. The SEC does the same thing. They will try to set their schedules up to help their team. This is, I think, the first time we're seeing the Big Ten finally do the same thing, instead of putting Ohio State and East Lansing the week before a game against Michigan, things like that, where they don't really take that stuff into account. I think now they're trying to say, you know what? Let's not overload Ohio State or USC by having them play. Like, we don't want USC playing Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State in any given year, at least for the first 2 years. Now things will fluctuate, and it'll be like, all right, you're not in our playoff hopes, so you're going to get everybody, and just have at it.
I think the bigger question that they're going to run into is, okay, you have one undefeated team and then three teams tied with one loss, and they maybe two of them didn't play each other. It's like, how do you solve that riddle to put one of those three teams in the conference championship game? I don't know. That's going to be a rough one, I think, when we come to that bridge. But whatever.
The tiebreaker system to be announced.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I believe I think I saw somebody put together a thing where like there's a situation where you could have like 4 or 5 Big Ten teams all end up with the same like undefeated record because of because of the way their schedules would line up. So have fun with that. First of all, it would never happen, but have fun with that scenario. And then I don't know if they're going to keep the tie. I guess you can't keep the tiebreakers because you have different rules now. You have no divisions. So at what point does it become the bowl or the playoff rankings? I do know the last part of the tiebreaker is simply coin flip.
Well, and you can't do the playoff rankings because the playoff rankings in season at that point of the year wouldn't come out till Monday or Tuesday. You need to have that game booked on Saturday night, after the last game's done. So you're going to wait 2 days for them to do the updated playoff rankings to book the game and announce who's playing who in the Big Ten championship game? No way.
No, you can't do that. That's a good point.
That's got to be done. That's got to be done. As soon as the final game's played, that has to be cut, dried, and determined. I mean, it's just because
how about a play-in game on Wednesday?
Hit the road, and the other batch of coaches needs to start game planning. So,
no, that's a great logistical point, Steve. But my point has always been, why are you giving up authority and sovereignty of your own league to an outside committee? Don't you are the Big Ten or you are whatever conference. Why are you giving up decision making to some committee?
Yeah,
figure it out.
The athletic directors and coaches could vote for it.
I say,
has that happened before?
Yeah, I did. 1973, pretty famous instance. And Bo Schembechler was nonplussed by the result, but his team got tied at home. It counts as a win for Ohio State when you go on the road and tie.
It's a 3-point win.
Yeah.
I think maybe by like the 4th or 5th tiebreaker, just send it to Congress and see how it goes there.
They're going to solve NIL, by the way.
I hear that.
I'm going to #stick to sports.
Yeah.
Great debate month here at the Voice of College Football. It was actually great debate month in May. We just extended, and it's one of those things where, when there's a promotion and they say such and such, and then it turns out that it's just that all the time. So that's what the deal is. And some of the next ones we're going to cash in on here is 97 Nebraska, Michigan. Who would have won that game? Who's better? National championship. We've got Ohio State, Miami, controversial calls at the end of the game. And if anyone pays attention throughout the game. And then, of course, we've got the spot, JT Barrett, 2016, Ohio State, Michigan. So we will be looking out for those, folks. We will wage those debates.
Is there
nobody
debate
here wanted to join our Clemson debate?
Is there a debate about the spot against Michigan? I thought that was settled. I thought NASA got involved. The math was done. I don't even think Michigan fans complain about that one anymore.
Computer chip in the ball.
They do to me.
I was in the interview room and I keep telling this story. They had the stadium feed from the 50-yard line, which is behind the play. And so I'm watching that screen because it's live as opposed to the broadcast screens from, I think, ESPN or ABC did that game, which would have been closer to the 20-yard line or whatever, 15-yard line, I guess. And the 50-yard line shot, you see his back and it comes down. It looks like it comes down in front of the line. I go, I don't think he got that. And then I had to wait for the broadcast angle to say, okay, I think he barely eclipsed the plane of the 15-yard line and it's first down. But yeah, for my first view live from where I was at in that interview room was he didn't get it, but obviously he did.
Yeah, I was standing on the field, like right at the line to gain on the sideline, on the home sideline, and was there with several of the national riders, the Dodds and the 40s and whatever. And the play happened, and I looked back, and they looked at me, and I'm like, I think he got it. It's like, wow, there's no way they're going to overturn it here. And it was a tense whatever, however long the review was, but standing right there, standing at the line to gain, in that instance, it looked good, but you're getting one view of it, but at least you're at the right spot, because with all this technology we have not figured out how to really have a camera truly at at a goal line or truly at a line to gain, and there's always this forced perspective that's put in from angles or whatever. We'll figure it out one day.
I'm really disappointed in the guy and you guys, the way you're just dismissing the line judge here. This guy is a professional. He's done this job for a long time. He is one of the most trusted people that you could ever want to be around. And for anybody to think that he didn't get that spot right, I can't believe we're still debating this so many years after the fact, when, again, even Jim Harbaugh, well, he won't admit it, but Urban Meyer admitted that he got the first down. JT Barrett admitted it. Isn't that enough?
Well, and here's the thing: what'd you really gain by getting it? You went out and got stomped by Clemson in the playoff. Michigan certainly lost their bowl game. I don't even know who they played. So, big whoop-de ding dong. You guys were the best teams in college football up till the end of November. Whoop-de-doo.
They should have tackled Curtis Samuel on third down, and then none of this. Well, maybe it still happens some other way, but don't let him run around in the backfield and then almost pick up the first down.
David Greenshield is ready to go. David, we will call on you. Yes, you can. Of course, David, you can join our discussion on any Ohio State related topic. Absolutely. I don't know that there's anything to me that I can think of that proves sports fans' bias more than if you bring up a controversial play, controversial call, game, where it's so razor tight that if you polled any other group of fans that have no involvement, no allegiance, it's going to be roughly 50-50, where, of course, it's 99.9% one way or the other. This proves the bias of sports fans right there. All right, folks, appreciate y'all being here. Get on over to Buckeye Huddle. You can catch both Kevin's work and Tony's work. Buckeye Huddle. Tony's got the Buckeye Weekly podcast. What's going on there, Tony?
Today we're finishing the third of our 3 all-decade teams with the 2010s. Some pretty decent players there. That's right in the Urban Meyer recruiting wheelhouse. So, I got to leave one of the defensive ends off the board, whether it be Chase Young, Nick Bosa, or Joey Bosa, when you put together an all-decade team. And only one running back. So who do you take? Ezekiel Elliott or J.K. Dobbins? Stuff like that. And of course, quarterbacks being what they are as well. So we discussed that in today's episode.
Before we get to Kevin and Steve, it brings to mind a comment that I made on a call-in show during our Big Ten show last night when I really processed it. And this is not going to amaze any of you because you probably are way ahead of me on this one. The whole Kyle McCord debate, I thought, when is the last time Ohio State had a quarterback that even if they weren't elite, they did not play at a championship level? They were not playing championship games, meaning C.J. Stroud played in playoffs. Justin Field played in play. Even Todd Beckman played in the BCS champion. You have to go back to Steve Belisari in the year 2000 before you can grab a quarterback who did not play championship, meaning impact games for Ohio State.
Had they won the game he didn't play against Illinois and then beat Michigan the next week, they would have won the Big Ten. So,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, well. Hey, as my buddy says, who had a disdain for the head coach at that time, the previous head coach, you lose the battle, but you win the war. So there you go.
Steve, what's going on at Bucknuts?
Camp coverage, we're all over this recruiting and camp coverage. Patrick Murphy, Bill Kurlick, and myself are out there at all the camp events. And I'm just astounded by the amount of photos and videos and stories that are generated out of these camps. And, I thought back to a year ago, we did this last year, and you go to these camps and you try and file away these names, and then they just kind of go off into the ether. A lot of times you never hear of some of these guys again, but for 1 week, they are front and center in the Ohio State recruiting genesis here. And so you try and cover as much as you can. And a few of these guys will ultimately end up at Ohio State, but they have 400 kids at camp, and maybe 2 of them will ever suit up in a live game for Ohio State. So kind of does put a lot of it in perspective.
Kevin, what's going on in your world?
Just get back into the swing of things. I took the weekend off to go to North Carolina to see my niece graduate from high school. NASCAR driver J.J. Yaley's kid graduated from there, and 4 of the kids from John and Kate plus 8 graduated there. As there was like, Gosselin. I'm like, no way. And then I talked to my sister after the event because we weren't sitting together, and she's like, oh yeah. I was like, interesting. But as for what I'm doing, I'll probably find a show that I will knock out, maybe a live show on Friday after we go through the camps on Wednesday and Thursday, and just really just trying to get my arms around what's happening here in terms of recruiting. I think June and July will be big months, and people will not be able to sit there and talk about Ohio State's minuscule defensive recruiting class by the time we get through this, but there's still going to be a lot of guys that people will have to wait for.
Steve, by the way, the discussion and the delineation of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry historically continues to be a big hit, causing me to name Michigan as the dumb fan base of the day the other day, and they certainly enjoyed that.
You could do that every day of the week. I mean, that's nothing new.
All right, folks. Appreciate y'all being here. Typically on Wednesday, folks.
All 5 of them.
Typically on Wednesday, folks. But of course, subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications.
Why does a MAC school need a stadium that large? That's what my buddy, when they were going through the Rich Rod years and the Hoke years, and they were really struggling to put a representative football team on the field, and they just spent many millions to put in that extra whatever development it was on the east side. My buddy they showed the high shot for one of the games, and he texted me, he goes, why does a MAC school need a stadium that large? Interesting. Oh well.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. Guys, have a good time at the camp, and we will see you all back next week.
All right.
Yep.